the episode. With me today is the man, the myth, the legend, Prometheus. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So the first thing I wanted to ask you about is around 2.5 years ago is when I first started getting into shmups, and one of the things I read to kind of get myself a deeper knowledge of the genre is the guide you put together, The Full Extent of the Jam. And so my first question is, what inspired you to write this guide?
All right. So, I think that what inspired me to write this guide is the time that I spent on the forums talking about improving and talking about scores. I had a feeling that I had advice that I could share. So basically, that's what inspired me, really. So the discussions with people on the forums, on shmups.com specifically.
Were you getting a lot of people just requesting your advice pretty often then, it sounds like?
Sometimes, or I would just spontaneously respond to questions people were asking, and also reading the advice that other players would give people, or these types of discussions inspired me to give my own opinion about this topic.
Were there any instances where maybe some of your fellow people on the Shmups forum would be giving advice that you thought might have been a little, maybe not the best advice, I guess, to newer players?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, sure. That must have happened for sure, yeah.
So when you decided to write Full Extent of the Jam, how long did it take you to put the whole thing together?
Yeah, so that I think was over a few weeks, although I don't remember exactly how long it took me, but I would say a few weeks, maybe a few months, something like that.
Yeah. I guess when you were trying to decide what content was the most important to focus on, did you have some ideas that you were going to include in the guide but decided might be not necessary, or some extra stuff you were going to put in there but cut out?
Well, I don't think I cut anything out of the guide. The one part that I hesitated for a little bit of putting into the guide was the part at the end about my own personal story. I hesitated a little bit about that, but I just put it in anyway. Yeah, so that's about it. I didn't really leave anything out.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, well, I'm glad you decided to put in that part with the personal story, because I've read Full Extent of the Jam many times, and now that part's become kind of my favorite part to read and kind of think about, because you don't get a lot of stories like that, at least I don't come across a lot.
I think I wrote this because I think that a lot of, for us, people who play shmups out of Japan, it's not very usual to have a chance to meet other players and stuff. And I think I want, you have to kind of take a lot of steps before you get to that point, because you have to read on forums and find out that there's some meeting somewhere and go to that meeting or something.
Yeah.
Because we don't really have arcades. I mean, at least in France we don't, or very few. Well, that's what made me want to write about it to, basically something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a fun story to read because, like you're saying, a lot of us, especially here in the US, unless you're close to California, I mean, we are the same in that we don't have a lot of arcades, and the arcades that we do have don't really focus on shmups necessarily.
Right.
So it's pretty hard to find a community of players in person to go and hang out with, especially higher level shmup players.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. It's such a niche and obscure genre outside of Japan or Asia or wherever there's arcades with these games in them. So
yeah, absolutely. It's funny because other genres of arcade games, like fighting games, for instance, I mean, I have a bunch of local fighting game communities, but no shmup communities anywhere that I can think of that are near me.
Exactly. It's much more unknown, for reasons not too obvious.
Yeah. So early on in the guide, you talked about kind of your philosophy on how you should be practicing for score, or an effective way to practice for score, which included using a lot of save states, using emulation. I personally think this is a great way. I agree 100%, but I'm curious, how did you come up with this method, or what kind of brought you to this way of thinking?
Basically, it came to me after spending a lot of time playing Dodonpachi without making an effort to learn chains. Well, I think I did have experience playing games such as Metal Slug, or also, if we're talking about shmups directly, Pulse Star, for example.
Yep.
Some old school shmups. But overall, I would say I realized when I really wanted to get better at Dodonpachi and scoring, that memorizing would be a big part of the process. And that's when I quickly realized that I really had to use these tools, since I'm not able to, see other players play in an arcade near me like they can do that in Japan. So if I wanted to approach these Japanese scores, I would really have to practice with a efficient method like this to have a chance to get good.
Yeah, how long would you say you played Dodonpachi before you started playing it for score? Was it a short amount of time or?
Yeah, not so short. I think, yeah, you told me earlier you started playing Dodonpachi a while ago, yeah, I also played Dodonpachi for quite a while before I started trying to learn scoring. So I remember actually that I had about 100 hours on the counter on MAME of playtime for Dodonpachi before I started to learn scoring at all, I think. At that time, I was mostly just trying to survive. Maybe I had
Yeah.
save states on individual stages or something, but I guess I was still doing a bunch of full runs sometimes. So yeah, I did spend a lot of time playing this game, and then before that, other games that are a bit easier to progress into, even if you're not using save states,
Yes.
So long time of that, yeah.
And what was the spark that kind of made you decide, okay, I'm done playing for survival. It's time to play for score?
I think that what triggered it for me is after I did that little tournament that I talked about in the story about Guange. Well, that was kind of the trigger for me, because in Guange you actually have a chain that goes through every stage, so it's even more important to never break your chain, even
Wow.
if it's easier to break. Because there was this tournament was a bit more competitive, and on a short amount of time, I had to really learn the scoring system. That was the trigger for me when I came back to Dodonpachi. I really wanted, because I really enjoyed in Guange the depth that came with trying to chain,
Yes.
So that's why I started. I mean, that's what made me start really learning to chain.
Well, I wish I knew a little more about. I mean, I've played a lot of Guangge, but I haven't done a lot of chaining in that game. But I do know when I first started playing DDP and approached trying to learn the chaining and all that, I was like, wow, this is freaking hard. What were your
Yes, it
thoughts
is.
on,
Yeah.
what were your initial impressions on scoring and chaining in DDP?
Well, at first I thought it seemed when I discovered Dodonpachi, immediately I had the feeling that it had a lot of depth for for competitiveness and like focusing on skills and such. But the chaining seemed maybe a bit too hard to approach, maybe. So I don't know exactly. Mm,
Yeah. And like you said, it does take a lot of memorization, that's for sure.
yeah. It's only after I started really trying to do it that I realized that it really makes you need to. It puts a lot of tension between trying to navigate the bullets and trying to do the chain, and so it gives a great depth to the game as a single player game against a machine with still many possibilities. I think so. That's why I think it's. I mean, I really loved it when I
Yeah.
started doing it. Yeah, even if it's really hard.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I feel like now that I'm kind of getting the hang of Dodonpachi's chaining, even though it's really strict, when you do get those full stage chains and stuff, it is extremely satisfying.
It is, yes, I think so. I agree.
So, when you started using your save state practice and trying to really memorize the game as much as you could, would you say this was a common way of approaching shmups at the time, or were you kind of doing something a lot of people weren't doing?
Well, a lot of people weren't doing it, but I still would say that probably it's hard. It's hard to say,
Yeah,
I know a lot of people were not doing it. Some people were. The discussions on the forum went as some players were talking about really avoiding. I remember people were giving the advice to new players that they should do one credit runs all the time.
yeah.
Like, so basically full runs. A lot of people were practicing that way, but not everyone. So I can see a difference between now and then. But it's hard to quantify or something.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. I was curious if when you released Full Extent of the Jam and people were reading it, did you get any pushback on people saying, no, 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 save states aren't the way to go. They're, only giving you a bite-sized chunk of the gameplay. You need to do full runs instead. Or did you hear a lot of things like that? Or
It's happened. Some people wouldn't agree. sometimes, rarely, you would hear people arguing about it being kind of like cheating in some way.
Right.
Sometimes, but not that much. I mean,
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. And you mentioned this in full extent to the jam, the struggle the Japanese players who are playing on PCB must have gone through. How many
yeah,
times they must have to get those high scores without any save states or emulation at all.
that was the way I imagined how hard it would be for them to to get the scores that they get playing with only playing the game from normally, like you can't have any save states or level select.
Yeah.
But after few years after I wrote this guide, or shortly after, maybe I actually went to Japan and could see the way that they play in the arcades a little bit. And I think basically maybe I underestimate the value of underestimated the value of seeing the other players around you and stuff. But yeah, whatever. It's just just one way of just a comparison.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if they had some kind of social ways of getting around constantly resetting. Like, if a top player got sick of playing the first 4 stages, he'd have someone else play him and then come in and practice the 5th stage or something. I don't know.
Possibly. Yeah, I know that for me, the time I spent just looking, you have somebody looking at you when you play pretty often, because it would be. Did you go to Japan maybe, or?
I haven't. I've spoken with Plasmo and stuff, and he's talked a little bit about the experience, but I don't have any first-hand experience in Japan at all.
Okay. Yeah, I could feel that having somebody watching behind you because they're waiting to play motivates you, and also watching them play when you are waiting to play is interesting, because you see a lot. You see the way that you see their own play style, you see the mistakes they make, you see the path they try to take. It's very it's motivating and pretty good way to. So
yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I don't have this experience with shmups necessarily, because I haven't played around another good shmup player in person, but with fighting games, I notice when people just practice on their own and stuff, they kind of progress slower than if they start going to tournaments and seeing play firsthand. There's something about it that motivates you to try and take more risks or try and learn faster.
Yes, and also I think that, for example, in my guide, I explained that I learned from videos. At the time, it was pretty hard to find many different videos, for example, of the same ship, for example, for Dodonpachi. But if you go to an arcade, you can see many different runs all the time. Nowadays, it's easier to access them because they actually post them to YouTube. I know there's a HO or something arcade that posts videos of shmup runs that have just been played pretty often.
Cool.
Yeah, so then you can actually see many examples of, and I think that's very valuable. So it brings another dimension to learning that you can't necessarily have from having only one top example video of some near world record for your ship, but you don't have. Yeah. So it's a difference.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. There's been times where I've been trying to pick up chain routes in DDP, and I'll watch your video, then I'll watch some of Black Keisto's video or the Stunfest video of the Japanese player, and I'll notice you guys sometimes will use different chain routes, and I'll decide, okay, which one kind of fits me the best or the way I'm playing the best.
Yeah, you can pick then. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can make your own then. Yeah, with choices and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually doing that yesterday. The part in 1-2 where you transition from the tank to the end part of the stage with all the little tanks. I was watching all your three's videos, and you guys all had different ways of making that link between the three. So I was like, I was trying each different one out to see which one I liked the best or was easiest for me.
That's nice. I think it's a mark of quality for a very good game that you have more than one way to. If it's the best, you have many different ways to do things efficiently, and it's still hard. I like that about.
Gives you a little more chance to express your play style or to play the way you'd like, rather than just having to follow direct line all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you were first learning Dodonpachi and really grinding it out, what was your practice routine like on a daily basis?
Well, for the longest time, I think that I would play about 45 minutes a day for long periods of time. And that's how I got better by playing daily. But the moments where I would play the most either because I was trying to make some big improvement fast, or because I was trying to make a new high score. Then I would play up to 4 hours a day, maybe, or maybe rarely more, but for a long time I did that, and especially 45 minutes or so daily playing. I did that for quite a long time, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a value to consistent daily play where,
Yeah.
I don't know, you're not playing catch up with what you're progressing on
Yeah.
too much. So in those long grinding sessions of Dodonpachi, I've definitely been there. I did that last night, actually. What would you kind of do in those long sessions? Would you focus on just a few stages, or if you were playing for a really long time, would you kind of hop all over the game and try and learn a bunch of different little things?
Very often I had one specific section that I was trying to improve on, at least on a single day. For example, if I was trying to learn a stage that I really didn't know how to play yet, then that would take days or weeks maybe of practicing mostly just this, and then a little bit of boss practice or such thing on the side. And then after I knew I learned everything in the game, then I do think I spent more time playing around a little bit of everything, to improve some dodging skills and also improve consistency all around and stuff like that.
And in Full Extent of the Jam, you talk about the importance of using the save states to build up your knowledge before you just go right into doing full runs, which I definitely agree with. At what point would you normally transition from save state practice to doing full run practice?
Well, so I think I got into this topic in the guide that I wrote, but basically, for me, it was about having a certain goal that I found attractive, feel like it's not too hard to reach. So that's when I would start doing full runs to try and get that goal. Basically, I was careful most of the time to estimate the rate of success that I could expect on this goal, and make sure that it wouldn't last too long to try and reach it.
Yeah.
And so what motivated me was the scores that I could see on the forums, and then when I passed, as I was just basically the scoring opportunities, I felt I could get a really better score without doing too many tries.
Yeah. Talking about the scores on the forum back then, when you first picked up DDP, did you have the goal of having the top score, or did that kind of come to you as you played the game?
So at first, I don't think when I began playing, I didn't expect that I would be able to beat the first score. Didn't really realize how it would be, or I was really just playing it for fun first. Actually, I think I found, I was playing Dodonpachi before I found shmups.com, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, then the idea of trying to beat Bruno's score, so BR1, who is the Italian, he was the Western record holder before. I mean, that's this idea. It just came to me quite a bit after having done some pretty nice scores in other shmups, which are a bit easier, such as Esprade and Polestar, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I feel like I've had a similar experience where at first I posted a score that was pretty low on the ranks, and then I was like, I think I could do a little better. And then
exactly.
I wonder how far I'm going to keep going. But yeah, every time I get a new score, I'm like, yeah, I know I could do better. And so it's kind of addicting in that way.
For sure. Yeah. I think it's probably more natural to start with just the next goal that you think you can reach. I mean, if you're thinking of trying to beat a really high score, you can't even really imagine how long it's going to take, or even if you're going to be able to do it. So at first,
it's kind of just like, you're just kind of pointing at the moon. You're like, I'll get there someday, somehow, but I have no idea.
It feels like that, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
So you mentioned you played Dodonpachi before finding the forum, so I want to know, how did you find Dodonpachi?
I found it because I had somebody gave me a MAME emulator. I had a bunch of games on it, some of them shmups, and I was looking at ROM sites to find more shmups, because in this MAME there was Blazing Star, and I really loved it. And I was looking at ROM sites, so I don't know why, but I just found this other ROM site before I found shmups.com, I think, and that's where I found, because I was looking for more shmups. I was trying to find harder or different shmups, more modern shmups, and that's how I eventually found Dodonpachi, because it was, I guess it's highlighted by many comments and stuff, so you end up finding it. There was this site with many shmups, only shmups listed, and some screenshots.
Yeah.
Which wasn't a forum site. I don't even remember the name of the site or anything, but I can remember the site.
Emu Paradise or something like that, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
I had a really similar experience with finding Dodonpachi, where I was playing Metal Slug on Final Burn Alpha. And
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and Final Burn Alpha doesn't have a lot of games that it supports, but one of them is Blazing Star, and I played some Blazing Star, and the other one is Dodonpachi. And so there we go.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I first played Dodonpachi, was on Final Burn Alpha.
Is that not a Neo Geo?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
But for some reason, it plays Dodonpachi.
Weird.
Yes, I don't know why, but it does.
Yeah, weird. I also played lots of Metal Slug before. Actually, that was my favorite game before I found the shmups. My favorite arcade game.
There must be something in the water, because I've said that many times as well. As I played a crap load of Metal Slug, and from Metal Slug went to Dodonpachi, so there must be some kind of, I don't know, underlying connection between the two in some way.
Yeah. Yes.
Of full run practice that we're talking about earlier, and kind of setting yourself these small goals and then doing full runs to get them. During that time, did you ever experience reset syndrome? Because I'm going through that right now, where you're doing the full runs, but you keep messing up kind of somewhere early on and then have to reset over and over and over. Did you ever have something like that?
Yes, I had I think I had this at different times. The way I dealt with it, I think, over time, is that I decided to accept that I would sometimes make mistake even very early on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it actually works in even in Dodonpachi and Dodonpachi Daiojo, where if you make a mistake, if you actually even lose a life in the first stages, but you play well in the following stages, you can still get a decent maximum bonus, and you only lose the value of the chain for one of the lesser value stages, because it's an early stage. And so you can still make a good run even with doing a bad mistake in the beginning. So I think it's that for me, it's the way I coped with this problem in the end. And I actually did make a bunch of high scores with like even personal best high scores, with sometimes some kind of mistake like that in the beginning.
That's excellent advice to hear, because especially with Dodonpachi, I'm wrestling this with right now, where if I die in stage 4 or 3 and lose my maximum, part of me is just like, okay, forget it, and then I reset.
Yeah,
but
I
should keep playing it out, it sounds like.
It's definitely a choice to make at every time, depending on where you make the mistake. In Dodonpachi, for sure, the worst thing that can happen is if you miss in the very middle of your scoring run, because that's what cuts the most maximum bonus, and you also lose a bigger chain. So, for example, if for me, when I played all these runs trying to get to Hibachi with a high score, if I missed at stage 5 or 6 of first loop, I think I would always restart then. Maybe I should have. I don't know, but yeah, it's a choice you have to make every time, I guess. Yeah.
The game is crazy brutal with that maximum bomb bonus.
It totally is, yeah.
Was there a critical point in your runs that every time you did the run, there was a certain point where you're like, crap, this is the part that I might die and it might lose the run?
Well, when I was trying to go up to Ibachi at that amount, basically for me the hardest points in the run, it was stage 1-5, in the middle of stage 1-5.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, actually, all the second half, I would say, up to the very most critical point for me was the place in 2-5 at the end with the building that has 3 parts, and if you destroyed all 3 parts together, it makes a cancel. And then
Yes.
there's lines of tanks coming up from the top, and basically this was my most likely to fail place in the whole game, I think. But yeah, but I actually found a better way of doing this, and then it kind of changed the distribution of risk for me in the runs, But yeah, there were other points such as 2-3 boss. I would
Oh,
rather
yes.
often
Freaking 2-3
miss there.
boss.
Yeah. Also, 2-3 mid boss sometimes killed me quite rather often, and there's a bunch of other places for sure that always felt like a risk.
Yeah, with 2-3 mid boss, I was actually asking about this on the Discord the other day. Is there any way to manipulate those swirling purple bullets, or are you just reaction dodging them?
Yeah, reaction dodging only. I don't think
Okay.
there's any way to, yeah. I do actually still love this pattern. I really like the way it's done because it's different. The way I cope with it, I like it about it is it's just a different method kind of for identifying the bullets is that that's what I do. I just keep looking at the point where the very fast bullets are all emitted,
Yes.
I keep looking at that place for longer than usual so that I can see even the bullets that are spawning later at a high speed so that I can be aware of all the bullets rather than the first that come to my ship, And
Yes.
that's how I cope with the high speed of the bullets coming last. And I think it's interesting. I really like this pattern. Very random for sure, but
Yes.
interesting. Yeah.
One of the few random elements in Dodonpachi, really, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think it's the one of the. It feels it's the one that's most obviously random. However, I do believe. Well, I think that all of the patterns, or most of the patterns in the game anyway, have some kind of randomization associated to it. Not the frequency, but like the exact position of the bullets. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of patterns are like that. I think it's an important quality about the game, so that you cannot just memorize exactly which pole between which 2 bullets you're going to pass at every point in the game. You can't really do that in Dodonpachi. I think it's a very important aspect of it.
You're exactly right. Every single run, there's always some slight variation to where you're going to
Yes.
have to make some reaction dodges, whether you want to or not.
And always reading the patterns. It's always a skill that put in practice in the game. I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking of patterns that I actually enjoy playing just because you mentioned the 2-3 one. And one that I used to hate, but now that I think is actually pretty fun, is the final pattern of 1-6.
Yes.
That one's pretty
It's great.
satisfying if you dodge it.
I agree. It's original. It doesn't really look like another pattern, and it's fun to dodge. It's never exactly the same, so you're not going to go left or right the same way every
Yes.
time. It's never really unfair. You can always get through if you don't make a big mistake. So yeah, I think it's really good, but hard.
Yeah.
That's why it's good.
In a day that you're doing a lot of runs and maybe your day wasn't going very well, you're having a lot of runs that were failing or you're getting frustrated, did you ever have a section of the game that you'd like to go to and practice? Mostly just to kind of refocus and refresh yourself?
I think that what I spent the most time doing this with is Hibachi, really. I
Okay.
really enjoyed practicing all of the patterns of Hibachi, so I spent quite a bit of time doing that. Also, bosses in general, I like it because it's all about the dodging and reading skills. Yeah, because the patterns of the bosses are some of the more randomized ones, I think, probably in the game. That's why I spent most time doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same way with 1-6 boss, where if I'm doing a lot of runs and they're just dying on me, I'll go practice 1-6 boss for like 30 minutes or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I did the same. Yeah, I was doing the same at some points for sure. Yeah.
So speaking of Dodonpachi, kind of as a game, not just the scoring of it, but as an overall game, what do you think is your favorite aspect of it? And then what do you think is its greatest weakness?
Okay. So, well, best aspects is the depth of the. For me, the single best aspect that really attracted me with the game is the depth in the reading and dodging. So navigating bullet patterns with a small hitbox and lots of bullets. This is really what I love the most about it, and so it has the level design that makes it really good, and then the depth of the scoring system, the way that it puts tension between reading and dodging the bullets, but also making the precise moves that will net you the chain.
Yes.
All the level design that comes with it. So it has great level design on top of great mechanics, and the scoring system, I think it's great, but the biggest weakness would be the way that it punishes mistakes, in my opinion. That's my opinion is it punishes mistakes too hard.
Yeah, I agree. It is brutal.
Yeah. I think that everything about the difficulty of making the best possible score in Dodonpachi is quite great. Yeah, it's great. But it's a shame that there is no way to perform a little bit less perfectly and still make a rather good score, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like I've gone through the same thing where there's been times where I've been playing really well through almost all of my run, and then I make a slight mistake in like the end of stage 5 or the beginning of stage 6, and I feel like, shit, I gotta reset now.
Yeah, it's just gonna rob you of all your points. Yeah.
This is just my personal opinion from having played the game for quite a long time now, is I feel like maybe one of its greatest weaknesses, because of how severely it punishes you, is the inclusion of stage 1. Because it gets pretty numbing to play that stage over and over and over and over again. But
yeah, but for sure. Yes, I agree. Yeah, okay, I see what you mean.
Yes.
I agree with that. Yeah, it's true that stage 1 is, at the very least, stage 2 has a difficult chain, actually, interesting chaining. So it's true that stage 1 feels like a bit too much of a tutorial almost.
Yes.
So that, you don't really want to have to spend 3 minutes on it every time you restart.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of stage 1 in DOJ, where it doesn't feel that way like the stage 1 of DDP, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Stage 1, DOG has this interesting aspect where it starts being hard really early, and you can even make it a bit harder if you want to make a higher score. So that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of poor Saturn version where they add in that extra thing before stage 1. That must be just can't imagine playing that over and over.
Damn, yeah. I've actually I've seen this a few times. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's very weird. Yeah, I don't think it's the smartest idea, really. Yeah.
So, going back to your time learning Dodonpachi, how would you describe your rate of improvement in the game? Do you feel like you were constantly pushing forward? Or did you have periods where you felt like you were stuck, you weren't improving, and you became discouraged?
Most of the time, I felt like I was improving. Well, after I started getting serious at it and using the method of using save states and all, then improvements felt rather quite steady. Even after I made my best score, I feel like I still could learn to get better in save states. I could feel like my skill is improving, but because the game doesn't necessarily give you your points unless you make that perfect play, you don't really know if you're going to get a better score. You have to try for it many times. So, but yeah. So anyway, practicing efficiently, I feel like I was always making progress. But however, this is what started me doing safe states and learning chaining. But there was a time when I was playing just for survival, trying to finish first loop with more lives, where I spent lots of time, quite a bit of time, playing around levels without trying to memorize that much.
Yes.
And then I could feel like I wasn't improving that much, because you don't really need to push your accuracy that far if you're only trying for the easier goals. That's how I would say.
Yep, I think I've been there for sure. And speaking of the loops of Dodonpachi, I'm really curious, how far did you get when you were just playing for survival? You weren't worrying about scoring. How far did you get in the game? Did you get a 2-all, or was that way down the line?
No, not at all. Yeah. No, I think that the best I was doing was stage 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
I was game over in 2, 3 or 2, 4. Maybe it's before I really got more serious. So yeah, survival, pure survival. I only did that much, but I mean, if you want to, it's possible to play for survival and go further if you're just going to be focusing on learning survival paths. It's possible.
Yeah, and
For sure.
as someone who's aiming for a 2-all in the game, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the first loop. Let's say someone is just wanting to get a 2-all. I don't, but I'm just saying, hypothetically, if someone just wants a 2-all, would it still be worth it for them to learn the chain routes just for the consistency?
No, I don't think so. I think that if you avoid trying to chain, you will be able to find methods that are safer because you are not under the tension of the chaining.
Yeah.
And you will get less points. I think that's one of the reasons why the chaining system actually has good synergy with the dodging in the game. I think that many shmups before Dodonpachi, if you find the best survival path, it's also often a scoring path. Depends on the game, but I think that Dodonpachi does that really well, and it does mean that you can find, you can definitely find survival paths that don't chain, and are safer. Yeah,
I think you're right, because I was thinking back to my first 1-all of that game, and I may have set the world record on the lowest scoring 1-all of all time, because I was just shamelessly bombing and like doing basically everything opposite of what you should to get score. And yet I got really consistent at clearing the first loop doing that. So, but my scores were horribly low.
Yeah, the game doesn't allow this for score.
No, not at all. So when you were learning Dodonpachi and you were progressively building up your skill and those types of things, was there ever a moment that stands out to you as kind of like a moment of clarity or like a breakthrough in your personal skill where you thought, oh, I understand this game now, or things just make a lot more sense to me now?
I can't remember of one particular moment where I had like a large breakthrough. I think it was more like small improvements, or smaller bits of slowly building up. So I don't think there was one moment I could point out as being like a very big breakthrough that I don't know.
Oh, it sounds more like, just like you said, it was just kind of adding up on top of each other through consistency and smaller victories at one rather than one big like aha.
Yeah, or for example, to take an example from the guide I wrote, for example, I at one section I talk about different techniques that I use, like bullet herding and like different ways to moving with the flow or stuff. Like I call it it that way. And these are things I discovered separately and over time, So basically, one day I worked on the bullet herding, and I think every shmup player probably goes through that at some point, especially herding. And so it's all of these things I just discovered pretty much one by one by working on them. So every one of them they bring their own advantage, and so they are small breakthroughs. I think.
Yeah, and I really love that you included those techniques and like descriptions of them in your guide, because I remember when I was first getting into shmups and I was reading through it, I was like, holy crap, I didn't know about doing this. Especially the going with the flow, right? We're moving with the speed of the bullet pattern. Because before then, I'd been crossing the bullet patterns. That would have been my thought, like, okay, cross them as quick as possible to get out of them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah. I understand that, because I went through that as well, and it took me quite a while to realize each of these techniques pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there was, for me, as a player, an aha moment where I realized where I need to be looking. For a long time, I was always looking at my ship, or I didn't know where to look. I was just looking all over the place, trying to figure out where to look. Yeah. And then there was a moment where I realized with each situation, I should make a mental note where I should look. Like you mentioned in 2-3, where you're looking at point where the bullets are spawning.
Yeah, all this awareness and focus techniques, and it's really, I think, what the game teaches. Yes. And it's applicable to other types of games, really. And it's what makes it really fun to play also, I think.
And I noticed in your guide, you did a lot of examples from the first, I don't know if it was from 2-3 or 1-3, but that boss seems to want to teach you a lot of things about shmups. when it comes to
Oh yeah.
herding and moving with the flow and all those.
Yes, for sure. I really like all the bosses in Dodonpachi, but it's true that 2-3. Well, I think also I used it as an example because when you take a screenshot of, it's not moving,
Yes.
and so I had to pick something that seemed clear enough, even though it's not moving. So that's kind of the reason why I picked it as an example as
Oh,
well.
yeah. The
Yeah.
background's nice too with the sky. Really contrasts the bullets nicely.
Yeah, and yeah.
One thing that I thought was really interesting is in Full to the Extent of the Jam, you were talking about kind of the differences between DOJ and DDP. And at the time, it sounded like one of the main reasons you were going with DDP over DOJ was simply because it emulated better at the time. Is that accurate? Or did I read
Yes,
that right?
yes. Yes,
Okay.
totally, yeah.
So I guess my follow-up question to that is these days where emulating DOJ is excellent, if a new player was wanting to get into the Dodonpachi series, would you still recommend DDP over DOJ?
Yeah, so, well, I think that I wouldn't really recommend one over the other, or that's kind of difficult
Right.
to decide. They're both good and they're different. And DOJ certainly has a few flaws or like shortcomings that you don't necessarily have in DDP. Like for example, if I'm going to name it, I could say in DOJ Black Label anyway.
Uh-huh.
If you lose there's a rank and it gets really hard if the rank is really high, but the rank goes up that high only if you optimize your chaining a lot and if you never die and
Right.
also don't bomb. So the rank goes high and the difficulty gets really high, and that's really good. However, if you lose just one life, the rank drops a lot. And because of that, it makes the difficulty drop a ton as soon as you make a mistake, and DDP doesn't do that. So that's one advantage of DDP over DOJ Black Label, in my opinion, that it doesn't drop the difficulty like that. So it's still fun to play after a mistake, for example, and it's still difficult to get past the obstacles. It's more difficult than DOJ after losing one life. Yeah. Also, Dodonpachi has a bigger hitbox. Your ship has a slightly bigger hitbox, and I think, well, DOJ the hitbox is really small, and sometimes I think it's maybe a bit too small. You could say that it's a bit different style, and you can not as easily get a lucky dodge, in DDP as in
Right.
DOJ.
Yeah.
So that's not a bad thing too. So yeah, it definitely has some qualities to consider even over DOJ. But yeah, both are great though.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing you're talking about the rank system, and I think one thing I do appreciate about Dodonpachi that I'm learning is it doesn't seem to have a rank system that I'm aware of, which is a nice feeling because sometimes when I was doing runs in DOJ when I was first learning it, I'd feel like, okay, I don't want to play too damn well now. Otherwise, the game's going to kick my ass. So
Yeah.
I better just
Yeah,
throw
it's
out a
kind of like
bomb or something real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, does DDP have a rank system?
As far as I know, it has a like a hidden and almost irrelevant rank system where the rank starts. It climbs a little automatically into the game and then reach a point. I think it's something like that because if you use high difficulty, you can set in
Yes.
on the PCB of Dodonpachi, you can set higher difficulty, and that basically sets the rank to not drop anymore or something. No, not that's not right. It's like it sets the rank to maximum as soon as you start the game,
Yes.
so that you get enemies in stage 1 they fire more, but then if you get to stage 5 or such, then it doesn't change anything anymore because the rank goes max.
Yeah.
Where I think something like that. So it has this, yeah, it's kind of irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. There's no real rank system in the game.
Yeah. Actually, for a long time, I wasn't sure if there was one or not, but there's this little case study I guess I have going where I was like, maybe there is a rank system because I noticed in stage 1-4 or in 1-5, if I had played the best I could all the way up to 1-5, you know the part where those needle enemies teleport in?
Yeah.
Well, if I'd played the best I could up to 1-5, those needle enemies would shoot bullets backwards at me, so I couldn't do that trick of flying.
Oh, I see this one. This bug also happens in stage 1-3 or 2-3 with the same types of enemies. I think this one bug is a random bug.
Not a rank thing,
Yeah,
huh?
it's random. Yeah, it can actually also destroy your attempt in 1.3 if you're doing some specific optimized strategies. Something that WTN talked about, but it's a random bug. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. It's a random bug. I actually thought it was. I wasn't sure, but I thought maybe it had something to do with some kind of weird rank because there'd been times where I died in some earlier point, and then that bug didn't seem to appear, or they didn't seem to shoot backwards. So I thought maybe it was some kind of weird rank thing or something. Extent of the jam, another topic that you touched on very briefly that I thought was really interesting is you were talking about the build of MAME you were using and how you were concerned how cheating was still possible using that build. And so I wanted to get your thoughts, I guess, overall on cheating in shmups, and is that a big concern or is that a common issue, or what do you think?
Well, I think that it's a big issue. It's only an issue when you want to build a scoreboard online and try to figure out who really did what.
Yes.
And I guess when you work a lot on the game, you want to secure maybe having your name where it belongs, rather than where like allowing anybody to just type in a number and pretending they're above you, and people start to pay more attention to that guy, or something. So well, nowadays I just think that I think pretty much the same as before. Like, of course, there's liars and there's cheaters anywhere. So, but it's not possible really with a game that you record by yourself to make sure that it's impossible of cheating. It's always going to be possible, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it's up to anyone to choose if they want to believe a score that was posted by somebody if there is no proof being given,
Yes.
Does it matter in which context? Depends, but I think in Japan they understand this completely. I think all the scores, the highest scores, they have been witnessed at the very least, and most of the time recorded, even if the record is hidden, not posted online, but only accessible on a DVD at the arcade or something,
Right.
Of course, there is this element because I think everybody is aware that it's easy to pretend to have done a score. Even if you're a good player, you can type a number. I can do that. You know what I mean? It's easy to realize that, I think.
Yeah. I thought this was an interesting topic to talk about because I think it's coming up a lot more in the speedrunning community, where one of the interesting things is a lot of people who ended up being caught as cheaters weren't, some random dude who posted a score. It was more like one of the top players or some of the more skilled players who felt like, I could get this score. I should have got this score, or time, I guess. But I didn't because of this or that. But I deserve it, or whatever. So
yeah, for example, or that could be just their excuse for being caught or something. I don't know, but I've known of this because also before getting into shmups, I was part of community of Starcraft players, as you noticed, and in Starcraft we also always had people who were cheating and cheating in tournaments, good players cheating and getting higher than they should have been, and discovered a long time later, because it's very hard to catch them sometimes, I mean, and I had some experience of that, so that's why I talked about it, because I could see there was some fake scores, there was some history of fake scores, and there was also bullying of people who talking about the possibility that some scores were fake.
Yeah.
People were bullying people who were talking about this. For example, the reason is obviously because there are some people who don't want to get caught, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not proposing any specific solutions, of course, but I guess for me personally, since I'm in this bet with Plasmo for $100 that I could 2-all DDP by Christmas, working really hard to try and make that goal. But since there's money on the line, I feel like I need to come up with a really high standard of proof. So what I've decided to do is not only record the game, but also record myself playing the game so that you can match them up, and it'd be a lot harder to cheat doing that because, I mean, you can hear my arcade stick clicking and you can see me pressing the buttons, and so that would be
the kind of proof that shows that you to show that you definitely really did do it. It's good. I think even just a video or replay most of the time is good enough, unless it's obvious that the emulator can be used to that could be science, could be no science, depends.
Yeah.
I think no, it's hard to have a very solid proof, but a minimum, not just a screenshot, because that's so easy to edit, right?
Oh, yeah. Or just save state your way to the screenshot and then take the screenshot.
Of course, easily. Yeah.
Yes.
Or editing the screenshot, I have done it myself. It's so easy. I just copy and paste the numbers on the scoreboard, and I make a score.
Yeah.
I did this. It's very easy. So it just takes 5-10 minutes, and you can add a story to it over a long period of time, and could even have a snippet of your actual playing, showing that you have some skills, but you never did that score. You just typed it. Possible.
Yeah.
I was thinking about. Did you know that? Do you know about the documentary King of Kong?
Yes.
Because I've heard that recently the guy who was kind of suspicious record holder in the documentary,
yes,
recently admitted that he cheated, and indeed he falsified the score, the video.
Yes, I actually followed that really closely for a long time.
So
because
that's we were talking about, yeah.
Yeah, because even when that show first came out, which was 2007 sometime, like when it first came out, it kind of showed Billy Mitchell, that's the guy, as kind of being a shady dude, but the documentary never directly accused him of being a cheater, but it kind of implied that he was really shady with the way he was just handing in videos, and he refused to do live demonstrations and stuff.
Yes.
And so part of me was always like, yeah, there's something up with this guy. I think
me too.
Yes.
I felt that way, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, because a legit player, there's a certain sense of pride to where you make this other guy fly out to your city and you won't even demonstrate your own gameplay. Even if it's not up to your highest score, you could at least demonstrate your gameplay.
Exactly. You must make... I think if a player has a very high score and wants to be recognized as that, he must make steps to show that it is real.
Yeah.
He must make efforts to show it. If he doesn't...
There's always that doubt.
Then okay, but nobody knows that it's true. So you don't ask for anything, I guess. Well, something like that. Yeah.
So earlier you were talking about StarCraft, and this is funny for the listeners. In my question list, before we ever spoke, I came up with a theory that the reason why you play on keyboard is because you had a history of being a Brood War player. Because your avatar on the Shmups forum is Zeratul. Yeah. I play Brood War too, sure. So I recognize Zeratul. Yeah. And I know...
What race do you play?
Yeah, and I know Brood War, you got it.
What race do you play?
Terran.
Okay.
Yeah, dirty Terran player, but... But I recognized, okay, he has Zeratul, and he's a keyboard player. Maybe he plays Brood War, because I know in that game, you gotta hammer them keys, so...
Yeah, for sure. I actually did mention it in for example, the Jam guide in the beginning of story. As I reread, I did talk about having played StarCraft and Quake. Yeah, for sure. I was always PC player and competitive experience with StarCraft and some FPS like Quake and Unreal Tournament.
Yeah.
And these actually use the SQSD or WASD keys, so same movement scheme as for shmups, and I could already tell with these games the the clear advantage of keyboard over gamepad, even for movement with these keys. And then over sticks is a bit less clear. But I never saw anybody play FPS in an arcade with the same complexity of movement with the stick. But that's taking it a bit far because because I also talk about how I actually believe that keyboard is a better input compared to even sticks possibly. But yeah, basically I think it has some advantages and some small shortcomings compared to sticks. So just different stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I'm along the same line of thinking as you, and I'm actually a stick player. I don't play on keyboard very well.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I do have history. Before I played shmups, I played a lot of fighting games and Tekken especially. And there was this huge controversy in Tekken where there was something called the hitbox. Have you heard of that before?
Sure. Yeah. Hitbox. Yeah.
Which is basically a keyboard, but.
Oh yeah. Yes. Oh, the controller hitbox. Yes, I see it.
Yes, the controller hitbox.
Yeah.
Where basically, because its way of inputting directions was so fast and efficient over arcade stick, people were considering banning it because you could just do techniques that were very difficult on arcade stick.
That would be proof that that keyboard is actually superior. But I did notice something is playing a Street Fighter, because I do play fighting games with keyboard sometimes. I mean, not often, but I've done that. And I noticed that keyboard is perfect for as long as you don't need to make like a half circle or a full circle command really fast.
Yes.
Then I do believe that sticks have the advantage there. But if you're doing like only Dragon Punch or quarter circle techniques, keyboard is totally fast, and then it has the advantage of 3 fingers for 3 directions, so you can switch really fast and really accurate. So yeah, it's hard to beat that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, and I think there's been a lot of investigation into this, and I remember, you wrote Full Extent of the Jam in 2010, so I think you're a little bit ahead of the curve with that thought. I think the rest of the gaming community has caught on to how powerful keyboard really is.
Possibly.
Talking about input methods, one disadvantage, of course, that I'm sure you've ran into a few times of keyboard is that sometimes if you go to an arcade or if you're at a friend's house and they have an arcade stick, you got to play on arcade stick. So
yeah, for sure, that's happened to me so many times. Honestly, it's frustrated me very often because in all those moments which were the best moments to socialize around the game and also show off how I could play, many times I was not able to use a keyboard, and it's so important to the how good you are with your controller, and so it makes a lot of difference then. And so that's definitely brought frustration to me. So I don't think that I would just simply recommend anybody to just play with a keyboard. It's a choice to make.
Yeah, and what I've been doing is just trying to basically learn to be pretty competent on all 3 input methods. And of course I have my preferences for sure, but did you ever have to make like an effort when, like, let's say you're going to Stunfest or going to an arcade, did you ever sit down and like, okay, I'm going to play with arcade stick for a few days? And
absolutely. I did do that a lot. I enjoyed it too, trying to get better at using the stick on the cabs and do something good, even if it wasn't as good as I could do with the keyboard, but getting better step by step every time I had a chance. I did that and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. One video I want to talk to you about, because it's always been a point of fascination for me, was before I even read your Full Extent of the Jam, I saw the video of you playing at MIG in 2012, and I saw you playing on keyboard, and I was like, oh my god, this dude's playing a shmup on a keyboard. And then I saw that tiny little monitor you were using, and I was like, why is he playing on such a little monitor? So my question is that your monitor, or did they just give you a tiny monitor?
I think at that time it was not my own monitor, but maybe it was a 17-inch, but I can't remember exactly. But what I always used at home is a 19-inch CRT monitor.
Yeah.
And I don't actually even put it in a tate position. I just play in Yoko most of the time, because it's my computer and I don't want to turn my screen as soon as I go back to Windows or some other game. So, well, I did also make some effort to measure the difference in performance that could come with playing with a bigger screen. But honestly, I think that even if it does make but even just leaning forward, that's what I do. I lean forward on the screen. The distance between your eyes and the screen is always quite the big factor there. So even if I play on a cab, for example, and the screen's really big,
Yeah.
sometimes I need to take some distance from the screen to see more of the screen at once. And so same kind of movement, but I would just never go quite as close as I would on my smaller screen. It's the main difference, I think. It's better to play on Yoko, but yeah, I do use 19-inch monitor on Yoko is good enough. It works.
Well, that's really cool. So it sounds like you use a CRT computer monitor.
Yeah, I still do. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too as well.
They're the best.
Yeah, well, they definitely have the least amount of input lag. That's for sure.
That, yes.
Or display lag, I mean.
This is so crucial, man. I just don't want any of those 2 milliseconds or whatever, because I can feel it. Yeah, like it's small but real. I can remember a time when I started making the difference between a laggy game that's not running at 60 FPS and a time where I wasn't really able to do that. I think it just comes with experience.
Yeah. So I forgot to ask, this is a question from earlier. I forgot to ask, you asked what I play as far as in Brood War. What race did you play? This is just for my own personal curiosity.
Sure. Well, Protoss. I've always been a Protoss user. So mostly, as far as 1v1 is concerned and playing really competitively, trying to get better, I've always been a Protoss player.
And what's your history with Brood War? How long have you played the game? Do you still play it?
I have played it for a really long time, from like 2000 to 2018 or something. These days, basically what happened for me is like the coming out of remastered kind of made me more doubtful if I'm gonna play it more. But I'll probably play again on IC Cup or something like that. Yeah, basically I've played it a lot for a lot of years. I love this game a lot.
Yeah, I love Brood War too, so I just had to talk about it a little bit. So
for sure, man.
One of my favorite games of all time, for sure.
It's the best real-time strategy game. It's amazing. I hope someday there will be another new game as good or better. I hope even better. But I think it's the best so far.
What did you feel about Starcraft 2 when it came out? How did you feel about it?
Oh man, I was really hoping that it would be great, but I was disappointed all around, really. I played it as soon as it came out and even before. First of all, there was a problem with the social features of the game. For me, that's always been a huge problem with StarCraft 2. But then also the balance and the general design of the game did not give it a depth that's comparable to the first one, in my opinion. So after playing I played for 2 months when it came out, some hundreds of games, and I realized that every single game of Brood War that I played was much better and more interesting than any one game that I would play in StarCraft 2. That's how I felt. Then 1 year later, I came back and just tried to get master rank when it was just like came up with this, because I was at the top of the leagues, because I was already really experienced. It was easy to be good at StarCraft 2 when you were good at Brood War. That's what I think. Really, it was just an easier, simpler game. Really lacked the depth, and I think it's just stayed that way overall. Even if StarCraft 2 improved a bit, and it's not. I don't really want to say that it's a terrible game, because I understand it still has quite a bunch of the qualities of StarCraft 1, but I think it's not as good, and it's basically I think it's not as good, it's not as deep, and no reason for me to play it much more. Yeah,
I had a very similar experience too. I'm not a super highly technical Brood War player. I'm not like really good, but middle of the road, I guess, is how I describe myself in Brood War. But I remember when it first came out, I played it exactly for like a month or two. Then I thought, no, this game sucks, and I never played it again.
StarCraft 2?
Yeah? Yes, StarCraft 2.
All right.
I just went full hipster and went back to Brood War.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I think a lot of people have felt this. I think StarCraft 2 benefited from the business kind of business appeal, even for players, because the very best players could have a chance at getting a bit more money from the scene with StarCraft 2, and so it led people to stick to it. But most of the people who had played StarCraft 1 and did not intend to get into the more businessy side, I guess.
Yes.
Kind of feel like that to me, but yeah, no, I mean.
Going back to full extent of the jam, it was released, I looked this up yesterday, on December 9th, 2010, so it's been almost 8 years since it's come out. I'm curious, are there any aspects of that guide that you think you'd like to go back and revise or add to or update even?
Yeah, well, I've thought about it a few times, and I think there was I thought about making like I was thinking maybe that the guide stresses too much on copying the play of a very very high scoring video and trying to just copy it. I did make the nuance and talk about how you can adapt it, but now I think that maybe I could have. I don't know. I would say that today is just like it's good. It does a lot of room for starting from trying to copy a very high scoring video and finding your own way of doing it a little easier, even if it doesn't make as many points. But I actually touched on that in the guide. So then sometimes I thought about what if I just continued the personal story at the end, but I don't really think I want to do it because I think I already gave the description of how the social meetups and stuff in the story. It's just my own story that it gives the idea of trying to go and meet people and go at events and stuff. I think it's what I really wanted to kind of encourage the reader doing. So that's why I'm not continuing to.
Sure. I'm sure though you've had a lot of great experiences in shmup since then, as far as going to live events or participating in things like that.
Yeah, because so writing this guide, I went to Japan and I went to Washoe and I met other people there and I had more experiences basically that I could write about them, but I don't think it's necessary because the idea is more important than the story, I think. So the idea of trying to meet people and go at events and stuff like that. So I think it's already conveyed in what I wrote before.
That's really cool to hear. You went to Japan and got that experience. Was there when you went to Japan, was there any standout experience you had or something you learned that you hadn't expect to come across before going?
I think anybody who lots of players have gone to Japan and experienced lots of things like that. It's always Japan. I mean, going there for me was really crazy on the shmup side, and also everything else is very astonishing and surprising and interesting. Sometimes scary. Things like that. Like it's really feels like a very different place. So, but if focusing on the shmups and arcade stuff, I mean, it's hard to also to just point out one single thing because there was many things. So I mean, watching, for example, that time SPS made a demonstration of Ketsui in Washoe, which was magnificent to watch. A very very beautiful play, and I really enjoyed watching it. And there were the people watching it, everything, all the details. So it would be kind of long to talk about, I guess,
Yeah.
But also even, for example, at Washoe, the demonstrations of games such as some Psycho games, I think it was some of the Strikers demonstration. It was also interesting to watch, despite being a fail from the player, because he actually game overed and then got smashed by the game for not being able to come back, and it was still interesting to watch. So seeing the types of players who play shmups at the arcades, every different arcades with different games, different atmosphere, people I met there, so much stuff. So it's hard
Yeah.
to choose.
Before doing this interview, I did a little bit of just research on some of the other games you play, and you mentioned in your post on DOJ that since finishing up or getting your high score in DDP, it sounds like DOJ, I don't know if this is still true, is DOJ now your favorite shmup or your preferred entry into the Dodonpachi series?
Yeah, good question. I'm not very decided on that because, as I said a bit earlier, I think that Dodonpachi does have some qualities that DOJ not exactly lacks, but is not as good at. So the difficulty after a mistake because of the rank, and the size of the hitbox allowing lucky dodge, kind of,
Yes.
So it depends also on the version of DOJ, so it gets complicated.
Yes.
Basically, I think both games are really good. And DOJ does have, I think if you are a higher level player, DOJ Black Label is maybe a little more attractive. It's probably less attractive if something like that. Maybe DDP is better to start with, and DOJ is better when you're already pretty good, pretty experienced.
Yeah, it's kind of like the sequel in many ways, not just in number, but in design and in difficulty too.
Yes, yeah, and that's why definitely also it's interesting. It's a good. I really enjoyed it. Like I do think, like, for example, the chaining style of DOJ is different and good. The fact that it has more difficulty from stage 1 is a very, very good perk for when you're playing seriously, and
yes.
for like So I mean, I really love the time spent in DOJ in a different way than DDP, just different. So yeah, I would give 5 stars to both probably, but I would still criticize for both games the punishment for mistakes. That would be my biggest criticism for sure.
Yeah, and do you normally play Black Label then? What are your thoughts on White Label?
Yeah, White Label. I think White Label does not have this flow that I talked about earlier of the difficulty if you lose just one life in White Label does not drop like as much as like a Black Label, so that you still feel like you're playing a hard game even after losing one life. That's good. I think that's very good, but it has some crazy flows that kind of counterbalance this. So
yes.
I mean, the removing of lives second loop doesn't do anything good for the game, in my opinion. Also, it has some really random and very hard patterns on the early bosses of second loop. Looks almost done on purpose, to break your runs. And so too spiky and unfair difficulty at some spots. So, but yeah, that's my opinion. I talked about it last time with WC. Sorry, I get mixed up. WC at Stunfest, and he was because over there in China they have White Label most of the time. They play in White Label. Didn't want to really switch to Black Label, just because of the first floor I talked about. Like, well, also not wanting to have to learn new strategies.
Yeah.
But the fact that you lose so much rank in Black Label after one death is a pretty big fun breaker.
Mm-hmm.
When you play, you want to just have a good end of the run, even if you make a mistake. I think it's important.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. It does make me wonder what Cave was thinking when they're coming up with White Label, because, like you said, it does seem like they're kind of trying to slap the player in the face, where they're like taking all your lives and then throwing out some crazy stuff early on.
I mean, my opinion is that that's the way I see it. I think lots of arcade games try to do this in different ways, and it's just about making you want to reach a goal and making a big gap every time you make a mistake, because it's just gonna rise exponentially the number of tries of games you have to play to reach the goal, and so it makes more coins in the machine. This is the arcade business model, and Caves have pushed it that way with many of their Danmaku shooters to different degrees in different ways.
Yes.
But it's also pushed them to make such difficulty at the same time. So it's a two-edged blade kind of thing.
And as someone who's played a lot of Dodonpachi and a lot of DOJ, I really want to hear your thoughts on how you feel about the loops in those games. Do you enjoy that there's 2 loops in them, or would you prefer them to be broken up into something more like Mushi?
I think that over time, the loops, it's definitely, I find it exhausting really to play such a long run, but also, yeah, it's kind of exhausting. And also because you don't have room for mistake. If you had room for mistake, it would be much better to go back into the game after making a big achievement, for example, you know?
Yeah.
I think that in Dodonpachi, it would be it wouldn't be too easy to break it down in for example, 2 difficulty modes, because the first loop does have a very interesting chaining, and the second loop, the chaining is pretty easy in comparison. So if you would only play the second loop as the hard mode, it would actually lack something in the game.
Right.
But yeah, I think so. Yeah, but it's true that it's made me after having played Dodonpachi and then Diojo, I have a hard time being motivated to start learning a new game if it also has loops. So
Yeah. I feel the same way, a little bit divided, where I feel like overall, like in Psycho games, I'm not a big fan of really all their loops and stuff. But I guess maybe because I'm such a Dodonpachi fanboy, part of me kind of likes that the loops are there, then part of me kind of hates that they're there. It's just divided in my mind, how I feel about it. So speaking of the 2 loops, I was curious to get your thoughts on, as a player, as someone who's 2-all Dodonpachi many times. Right now I'm working on, before Christmas, getting a 2-all, but I'm probably willing to shamelessly play for survival to get that 2-all. So my question is, if someone's willing to do that, do you think, and they have an experience with Dodonpachi and have played it a lot, do you think it's possible within that amount of time to get a 2-all?
By Christmas, yeah, well, it depends on how experience, what's the experience, the skill you've already developed, and also the knowledge you already have of the last stages, not just from the enemy and pattern layouts, but survival route that you would take through it.
Yeah.
Well, within 3 months, I think if you right now you're playing runs that end on like 2-4 boss.
Yeah.
And you need to get through 2-5 and 2-6 and Hibachi.
Yes.
means for me it comes down to two important things. Is at least is how good you are at bombing. If you see that you're going to get hit, it's a big point because of how many bombs the game gives you. It makes a huge difference if you can bomb before death a lot of the time. You can't do it all the time, but if you do it a lot, it makes a huge difference. And then that would actually come after having a good already a plan to get through 2-5 and 2-6, and maybe Bachi to a lesser extent, because if you don't, 2-5 and 2-6 are definitely stages in this game that constantly trap you to impossible situation unless you are where you should be.
Right.
There's still a bunch of possible places that you can do the stages, but puts a lot of tension on you to in a survivable place. You should have at least a plan. No. If you just leave it to too much to random, there will be a lot of situations when you just need to bomb, and then you get to 0 bombs, you lose your life. There's not that many lives. You're also definitely going to make mistakes like dying with bombs in stock. So it depends on that. And you need some practice to beat Hibachi with, say, at least 3 lives in stock, maybe 4. How many lives are you? Hibachi is pretty big because that can vary a lot depending on your skill. A little less knowledge for this one and more skill, and definitely bombing skill.
What was your experience like learning Hibachi and learning those last 2 stages? How long did it take you?
The last stages took a long time, but I couldn't say exactly some month. And actually, on those stages, I never had a very high success rate. So, for example, 2-5, I think that my success rate, I did not expect it to be much over 30 or 35%, not even really.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, it's very hard. And and 2.6 about the same, maybe no, just a bit higher, yeah, maybe 50% or something like that. And then Hibachi, well, you can't one life it anyway, but I did a lot of practice on it for a long time, month of Hibachi and hours of Hibachi practice in safe states.
Mm-hmm.
It's more simple on the knowledge side, but needs a little bit of knowledge and very good dodging accuracy stuff. So yeah, yeah, depends on your also experience with other shmups. Somebody who's already played Danmaku, they do it faster.
Yeah, I remember after I made that bet, the next day I sat down and loaded up. I made it to Hibachi just using save states and stuff, and then did some save state practice on them, and I was like, oh damn, this is gonna be a
Yes.
rough one.
Yeah, it's fun too, I think. I love it, honestly. I think that the Hibachi of Dodonpachi is a little more fun than Diodro because Diodro, you kind of have a precise method that you must use and also abuse a little bit of invincibility
Mm-hmm.
to get through some of the patterns. However, some of the patterns in Diodro are really fun and really fast and really hard, so it's nice too. I like it. But in DDP, Hibachi lasts longer and a bit better balanced, and you cannot abuse invincibility so much, and so it feels really good. And yeah, the reward at the end for lives is pretty good. It feels really good. I like it. It's hard and fun. Yeah, it's great end challenge. Can spend hours on it and learn stuff from it. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
I think I love it.
Those patterns are really something else. Even his first true final pattern, that one I've put a lot of time into, where he's just throwing out all the random bullets. It feels like
The final pattern you're talking about, or
when he enters his, I guess, final form, where he's just a
oh
flying
right,
orb, and then his
yes.
first pattern in that, where he's just throwing out all those random
Yeah,
bullets
exactly. I
everywhere.
love this one. It's very messy, but it's there's like three different types of bullets and speeds, or
Yes.
maybe a bit more, and it never feels it's really impossible if you make a lot of effort. It's really random. It's never exactly the same. I really like it. I think it's the balance here is pretty good, and there's the size of the hitbox that's pretty good in Dodonpachi too, so it gives a good feeling. Yeah, it's good thing.
At first, I was thinking maybe there's some way to manipulate these patterns and make them a lot more
Not so
manageable.
much.
Nope. You're just dodging for
Not
your
so
life.
much. I mean, yeah, mostly yes, but you can, having some kind of a bunch of different techniques that you know of to use for each pattern will help still. So yeah, it's kind of hard to give but yeah, a little bit of knowledge helps, but you can't manipulate that much. Still,
Yeah.
there's techniques that if you're not using them, it's going to be much harder. So, for example, that one I would say trying to move to the sides is as important as trying to move down and up, or just dodging what's directly coming at you
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily the best solution. Sometimes you want to go to the right or to the left to something that seems more manageable for a while,
Yeah.
something like that.
So, speaking of Dodonpachi and the end of Dodonpachi, I'm curious to hear if you have any future plans with the game.
But Dodonpachi 1,
Yes.
yeah, well, I don't know really at the moment. Recently, there was some new scores coming up, and I was just thinking about. I actually played a bunch of for fun, I could say, but with a possible goal in mind. I was trying to play AS
Oh,
Player
yeah.
2 to actually mix things up a bit. But yeah, I did. I learned the first few chains with it, and there is some extra difficulty involved. And playing it as player 2, of course, is betting on doing a no miss no bomb of the whole game up to Ibachi, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make it make sense from a scoring perspective, because of the difference of mechanics, small
Yeah.
difference. Yeah, so basically, I don't know for sure right now. I'm not playing a lot at all because I play other games. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have anything planned.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Let's say someone like Blackisto stepped up and beat your AL score. Would that be something that would maybe trigger you to come back and try and retaliate with a higher score? Or are you pretty happy with how things are now?
If I'm not mistaken, somebody actually, it was Bananamatic who's done a 608. I think I haven't seen the replay yet, but he's got a 608 million CL
CL,
score.
yeah.
And well, personally, I consider the game balanced enough that I compare between all the ships and not just players. I like the scoreboards with all the ships together. More,
Okay.
but yeah, for sure. So for me, I always thought that somebody beating my score with any ship, that would be a potential trigger. So that's what triggered me to consider starting something in AS. But it's happened, and I'm not actually trying to beat it right now. Maybe because I haven't watched the replay yet. No, I'm not trying to beat it yet. So if somebody beats my AL score, it's great. That would be great to see, but it's not going to make more motivation, or is it? Maybe. Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
It's hard for me because when I get involved with a game, I have a difficulty to play all the games at the same time most of the time, and these days there's some game that I'm involved with, and I switch around, and I still have so much more stuff to do
Yes.
with some of these games, so it's hard to say.
What game are you currently playing right now?
Yeah, so well, do I want to say it? Well, people will surely, but that's okay. I play World of Warcraft vanilla. I don't play any current version by Blizzard, Activision of World of Warcraft, because I play vanilla because I do world PvP,
Yes.
And that's what I love about World of Warcraft, and I think that vanilla is the definite best version by far of World of Warcraft. I think they always destroyed the game little by little with every expansion, and so I'm playing on some private server of WoW Vanilla and having lots of fun, and so that's what I'm playing right now. I also played recently. I played Heroes 3.
Oh, okay.
My computer is still quite old, you see, but I had lots of things nice to do with Heroes 3, and I think I'm going to buy a computer soon and maybe play some PUBG, maybe, because I'm interested in that game. It actually reminds me of the World PvP style gameplay a little bit. So who knows? But yeah, that's what I could say.
So to close things up, do you have any final thoughts or topics you'd like to talk about before we head out?
Oh no, not like that. Not that I can think of. Yeah, no. Future final thoughts or future plans I would like to talk about. Not that I can think of in the I don't know what to say really.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. It's been really cool, especially since I've watched your 5,000,047 run. I don't know how many times, probably over and over. So
wow.
Yeah. So it's really cool for me to get the chance to talk to you about DDP and about Full Extent of the Jam. I'm a huge fan for sure.
Nice. It's been a pleasure for me too.
Well, thanks for coming on.
No problem. You're welcome.